Jane Eyre by Charlotte Brontë.
Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre, published in 1847 under the pseudonym Currer Bell, emerged during one of the most transformative periods in English literature and society. The novel appeared at the height of the Victorian era, when rigid social hierarchies, strict moral codes, and clearly defined gender roles dominated British society. Yet Bronte's masterpiece challenged these conventions with unprecedented boldness, creating a work that was both revolutionary in its time and enduringly influential in its impact on literature and social consciousness. The historical context of Jane Eyre is crucial to understanding its radical nature. The 1840s were marked by significant social upheaval in Britain, including the Industrial Revolution's continued transformation of society, growing awareness of social inequality, and emerging debates about women's rights and education. The novel was published just 2 years before the California Gold Rush and 3 years before the Great Exhibition of 1851, during a period when traditional social structures were being questioned and challenged across multiple fronts. The literary landscape of the 1840s was dominated by established male authors and conventional romantic narratives that typically featured passive heroines awaiting rescue by male protagonists. Women writers, when they did publish, often did so under male pseudonyms and were expected to conform to acceptable feminine themes and perspectives. Into this environment, Brontë introduced a narrative voice that was unmistakably female, uncompromisingly independent, and revolutionary in its assertion of women's intellectual and emotional equality with men. The novel's subtitle, an autobiography, was significant in establishing its innovative narrative approach. By presenting Jane's story as a first-person memoir, Brontë created an intimate confessional tone that drew readers directly into her protagonist's inner world. This narrative technique allowed for unprecedented psychological depth and emotional honesty, particularly in exploring themes of desire, independence, and spiritual struggle that were rarely addressed so directly in contemporary literature. Bronté's background profoundly influenced the novel's creation and themes. Born in 1816 in Thornton, Yorkshire, she was the third of 6 children born to Patrick Brontë, an Irish Anglican clergyman, and Maria Branwell Brontë. The family moved to Haworth in 1820, where Patrick became perpetual curate. The isolated moorland setting of Haworth would later provide the atmospheric backdrop for much of Jane Eyre. Tragedy struck early when Maria Brontë died of cancer in 1821, leaving Patrick to raise 6 young children with the help of his sister-in-law, Elizabeth Branwell. The influence of Charlotte's educational experiences directly shaped the novel's portrayal of institutional life. In 1824, Charlotte and her sisters Maria, Elizabeth and Emily were sent to the Clergy Daughters' School at Cowan Bridge, a charity school for the daughters of clergymen. The harsh conditions, poor food, and unhealthy environment at this school contributed to the deaths of Maria and Elizabeth from tuberculosis in 1825. This traumatic experience would later be transformed into Jane's suffering at Lowood School, where similar conditions lead to the death of Jane's friend, Helen Burns. The creative environment of the Brontë household fostered Charlotte's literary development from an early age. Along with her siblings Branwell, Emily, and Anne, Charlotte created the elaborate fantasy worlds of Angria and Gondal, writing hundreds of miniature books filled with complex stories of passion, politics, and adventure. These juvenile writings developed Charlotte's narrative skills and her fascination with intense emotional relationships, themes that would reach their mature expression in Jane Eyre. Charlotte's experience as a governess provided crucial material for the novel's exploration of class dynamics and women's limited career options. Between 1835 and 1841, she worked as a teacher and governess, experiencing firsthand the uncomfortable social position of educated women who were neither servants nor family members in the households where they worked. This experience of social limbo, of being educated but economically dependent, neither fully accepted nor entirely rejected by the families who employed them, becomes central to Jane's character and situation. The novel's religious themes reflect the complex spiritual landscape of Bronte's era and personal experience. The early Victorian period was marked by religious uncertainty, with traditional Anglican authority challenged by evangelical movements, Catholic revival, and emerging scientific theories that questioned biblical authority. Brontë herself struggled with religious doubt and the tension between spiritual duty and personal desire, conflicts that are dramatized through Jane's encounters with different forms of religious expression throughout the novel. The publication history of Jane Eyre reveals both its immediate impact and the controversies it generated. The novel was an instant success with readers, going through multiple editions in its first year. However, critics were divided, with many praising its originality and emotional power, while others condemned it as coarse, disagreeable, and morally questionable. The anonymous publication under Currer Bell led to speculation about the author's identity and gender, with many assuming the passionate, forthright narrative voice must belong to a male writer. Contemporary reviews reveal the novel's challenging nature for Victorian sensibilities. The Quarterly Review famously criticised the book's moral Jacobinism, comparing its challenge to social hierarchy to the radical politics of the French Revolution. Other critics were disturbed by Jane's refusal to accept her social position passively and her bold assertion of equality with her social superiors. The novel's frank treatment of passion and desire, particularly in the relationship between Jane and Rochester, shocked readers accustomed to more restrained romantic narratives. The influence of Gothic literature on Jane Eyre represents another crucial aspect of its literary context. The Gothic tradition, established by authors like Horace Walpole, Anne Radcliffe, and Matthew Lewis, emphasized mysterious settings, supernatural elements, and psychological terror. Brontë adapted these elements to create what critics have termed domestic Gothic, bringing the genre's emotional intensity and atmospheric effects into realistic, contemporary settings. Thornfield Hall, with its mysterious third floor, strange laughter, and dark secrets, exemplifies this adaptation of Gothic conventions to explore psychological and social themes. The novel's engagement with contemporary debates about education, particularly women's education, reflects broader social concerns of the period. The 1840s saw increasing attention to educational reform and expanding opportunities for women's learning. Jane's intelligence, her love of reading, and her career as a governess represent both the possibilities and limitations facing educated women in Victorian society. Her insistence on intellectual equality with Rochester challenges conventional assumptions about women's mental capabilities and their proper sphere of activity. The treatment of social class in Jane Eyre reflects the growing social mobility and class consciousness of the Industrial Revolution period. Jane's movement between different social positions, from dependent orphan to employee to potential heiress, mirrors the era's changing social dynamics. Her refusal to accept traditional class distinctions as natural or permanent challenged readers to reconsider assumptions about social hierarchy and individual worth. The novel's exploration of imperialism and colonial wealth, though less prominent than in later Victorian literature, reflects contemporary awareness of Britain's expanding empire. Rochester's West Indian connections and the source of his wealth in colonial sugar plantations introduce themes of exploitation and moral corruption that would become increasingly important in later Victorian fiction. Bertha Mason's Caribbean origins and her portrayal as the mad woman in the attic reflect contemporary racial and colonial anxieties, though modern critics have noted the problematic aspects of this representation. The psychological realism of Jane Eyre marked a significant development in the novel form. Bronte's exploration of Jane's inner life, her emotional development, and her psychological responses to trauma and love created a new standard for character development in fiction. The novel's attention to the protagonist's mental and emotional growth influenced subsequent generations of writers and contributed to the development of psychological realism as a major literary mode. The character of Jane Eyre stands as one of the most revolutionary and influential protagonists in English literature, representing a fundamental shift in how female characters were conceived and portrayed in Victorian fiction. Unlike the passive, ornamental heroines who typically populated contemporary novels, Jane is presented as an active agent in her own story, possessing agency, intelligence, and moral conviction that drive the narrative forward. Her character development from orphaned child to independent woman reflects not only personal growth, but also broader themes about human dignity, social justice, and individual potential. Jane's psychological complexity begins to emerge in the novel's opening chapters, where her childhood at Gateshead Hall establishes the foundational experiences that will shape her adult character. The 10-year-old Jane, who confronts her cruel cousin John Reed and challenges her aunt's authority, displays a fierce sense of justice and personal dignity that will remain constant throughout her life. Her famous declaration that, "I am not deceitful," and her refusal to apologize for defending herself establish her as a character committed to truth and integrity, regardless of the personal cost. The psychological trauma of Jane's early experiences creates both vulnerability and strength in her character. Her sense of abandonment and unworthiness, reinforced by Mrs. Reed's rejection and the Reeds' servants' cruel treatment, develops into a deep-seated fear of dependence and a fierce determination to maintain her independence. Yet this same trauma also cultivates her empathy for other outcasts and sufferers, making her capable of extraordinary compassion and understanding. This duality, vulnerability paired with strength, sensitivity coupled with resilience, creates the psychological complexity that makes Jane such a compelling and realistic character. Jane's relationship with books and learning reveals another crucial aspect of her character development. From her childhood reading of Bewick's History of British Birds in the window seat at Gateshead to her later discussions of literature with Rochester, Jane's intellectual life provides both escape from difficult circumstances and the foundation for her sense of self-worth. Her education at Lowood School, despite its harsh conditions, nurtures her natural intelligence and provides her with the skills that will eventually enable her economic independence as a governess. The influence of Helen Burns on Jane's character development cannot be overstated. Helen's Christian resignation and philosophical acceptance of suffering provide a counterpoint to Jane's naturally rebellious spirit, teaching her the value of patience and forgiveness, while never completely suppressing her innate sense of justice. Helen's death represents Jane's first major loss and her first encounter with the reality of mortality, experiences that mature her understanding of life's fragility and the importance of moral integrity. Rochester's character presents one of literature's most complex and controversial romantic heroes. Neither conventionally handsome nor traditionally heroic, Rochester attracts Jane through his intelligence, his capacity for deep feeling, and his recognition of her worth as an equal. His dark past, physical disability, and moral compromises make him a flawed figure who must earn redemption through suffering and genuine repentance. The evolution of his relationship with Jane, from employer and employee to intellectual equals to passionate lovers, challenges conventional romantic narratives and social expectations. The psychological dynamics of Jane and Rochester's relationship reveal Bronte's sophisticated understanding of human attraction and compatibility. Their connection is based on intellectual equality, mutual respect, and emotional understanding, rather than conventional markers of romantic attraction, such as physical beauty or social status. Their famous conversations, filled with wit, challenge, and mutual testing, establish a new model for romantic relationships based on genuine partnership rather than male dominance and female submission. Rochester's concealment of his marriage to Bertha Mason introduces complex questions about honesty, moral obligation, and the nature of marriage itself. His attempt to justify bigamy through his description of his arranged marriage and Bertha's madness reveals both his capacity for self-deception and his genuine desperation to find happiness with Jane. The moral crisis precipitated by the revelation of his secret forces both characters to confront fundamental questions about duty, love, and personal integrity. Bertha Mason, though physically present in only a few scenes, serves as a crucial psychological and symbolic presence throughout the novel. As Rochester's mad wife, she represents the consequences of passion without moral restraint, the destructive potential of unchecked desire, and the colonial exploitation that underlies Rochester's wealth. Her presence in the attic of Thornfield serves as a constant reminder of secrets, guilt, and the past's power to corrupt the present. Modern criticism has examined Bertha as a symbol of repressed female anger and sexuality, while also critiquing her portrayal as reflecting colonial and racial prejudices of Bronte's era. St. John Rivers represents another crucial figure in Jane's psychological and moral development. His cold religious fervour and attempt to convince Jane to marry him and become a missionary in India present an alternative path that would require the suppression of her emotional nature in favour of pure duty. St. John's character embodies religious extremism that denies human feeling and individual desire, providing a contrast to both Rochester's passionate excess and Jane's balanced approach to love and duty. The psychological tension between Jane's need for love and her requirement for independence creates the novel's central conflict. Her famous declaration that she has as much soul as Rochester and is his equal in the eyes of God articulates a revolutionary concept of human worth based on internal qualities rather than external circumstances. This assertion of equality extends beyond romantic relationships to encompass broader questions of social justice and human dignity. Jane's moral development throughout the novel reveals her growing ability to balance competing claims and desires. Her decision to leave Rochester rather than become his mistress demonstrates her commitment to self-respect and moral integrity, even at great personal cost. Her later inheritance, which provides her with economic independence, removes the financial pressure that might have compromised her moral choices, allowing her to return to Rochester as an equal partner rather than a dependent. The psychological realism of these characters emerges through Bronte's attention to their internal lives and emotional development. Rather than simply describing their actions, the novel explores their motivations, fears, desires, and moral struggles. This psychological depth was revolutionary for its time and established new possibilities for character development in fiction. The supporting characters, while less fully developed than the main protagonists, serve important psychological and thematic functions. Mrs. Reed's jealousy and cruelty toward Jane stem from her own insecurity and resentment at being forced to care for her husband's illegitimate niece, as she believes. Mr. Brocklehurst's religious hypocrisy and cruel treatment of the Lowood students reflect the corruption of religious authority when combined with personal prejudice and class bias. Adele Varens, Rochester's ward, provides Jane with an opportunity to exercise maternal feelings while also serving as a reminder of Rochester's past relationships. Jane's patient, kind treatment of Adele demonstrates her capacity for nurturing and education, qualities that will serve her well in her eventual role as wife and mother. The psychological complexity of these characters reflects Bronte's belief in human complexity and moral ambiguity. None of her major characters are simply good or evil. Instead, they possess the contradictions and complications that characterize real human beings. This psychological realism was groundbreaking in Victorian fiction and helped establish the novel as a serious art form capable of exploring the depths of human experience. Jane Eyre operates as both a compelling personal narrative and a sophisticated critique of Victorian social structures, challenging contemporary assumptions about class, gender, religion, and individual worth. The novel's thematic richness emerges through its exploration of fundamental questions about human dignity, social justice, and the possibility of equality in a hierarchical society. These themes are not merely abstract concepts, but are embodied in Jane's experiences and struggles, making them concrete and emotionally resonant for readers. The theme of social class permeates every aspect of the novel, from Jane's initial position as a dependent orphan to her eventual inheritance and marriage to Rochester. Brontë presents a nuanced critique of class distinctions that goes beyond simple condemnation to explore the complex ways in which social position affects individual identity, relationships, and opportunities. Jane's movement between different class positions throughout the novel allows Brontë to examine the arbitrary nature of social hierarchy and its impact on human relationships. Jane's position as a governess places her in a particularly complex social situation that exemplifies the novel's class themes. Neither servant nor family member, the governess occupied an uncomfortable middle position that highlighted the tensions and contradictions within Victorian social structure. Jane's education and accomplishments place her above the servants, yet her economic dependence and lack of family connections exclude her from full acceptance by her employer's social circle. This liminal position allows her to observe and critique social pretensions from a unique perspective. The novel's treatment of wealth and its relationship to moral worth challenges conventional Victorian assumptions about the connection between material prosperity and virtue. Rochester's wealth, derived from colonial exploitation, carries moral taint that must be purged through suffering and loss. Conversely, Jane's moral integrity remains intact despite her poverty, suggesting that true worth is independent of economic status. Her eventual inheritance provides her with economic independence without corrupting her character, because it comes through legitimate family connections rather than exploitation. Gender equality represents perhaps the most revolutionary theme in Jane Eyre, with the novel challenging virtually every contemporary assumption about women's nature, capabilities, and proper social role. Jane's assertion of intellectual and spiritual equality with men was radical for its time and remains powerful today. Her famous declaration to Rochester that she is not an automaton and that she has as much soul as he articulates a fundamental challenge to patriarchal assumptions about women's inferiority. The novel's exploration of women's economic dependence reveals the practical foundations of gender inequality in Victorian society. Jane's career as a governess represents one of the few respectable occupations available to educated women, yet even this position offers minimal security and social status. Her inheritance becomes crucial not merely for its romantic plot function, but as a means of achieving the economic independence necessary for true equality in marriage. Bronte's treatment of passion and sexuality in the novel was controversial for its frankness and psychological realism. Jane's acknowledgement of her sexual attraction to Rochester and her struggle between desire and moral conviction presented a new model of female sexuality that recognized women as feeling, desiring beings rather than passive objects of male desire. The novel's exploration of the tension between passion and principle reflects broader Victorian anxieties about the relationship between emotion and morality. Religious themes in Jane Eyre reflect the complex spiritual landscape of the 19th century, with the novel presenting multiple forms of religious expression and critiquing the extremes of both evangelical fervour and formal religious authority. Mr. Brocklehurst's cruel Calvinism at Lowood School represents the distortion of Christian principles through hypocrisy and class prejudice. His emphasis on humility and submission serves to maintain social hierarchy rather than promote genuine spiritual development. Helen Burns embodies another religious extreme through her saintly resignation and acceptance of suffering. While her Christian patience provides a counterpoint to Jane's rebellious spirit, her early death suggests the limitations of pure resignation in the face of injustice. Helen's influence on Jane is important but not definitive. Jane learns from her friend's example while maintaining her own sense of justice and self-worth. St. John Rivers represents religious extremism of another kind through his cold evangelical fervour and attempt to subordinate human feeling to divine duty. His proposal that Jane marry him and become a missionary represents a form of spiritual tyranny that would require the suppression of her emotional nature and individual desires. Jane's rejection of his proposal affirms the value of human feeling and the importance of maintaining personal integrity in religious faith. The novel's treatment of imperialism and colonial exploitation, while less prominent than its other themes, reflects growing awareness of the moral costs of Britain's expanding empire. Rochester's wealth derives from his Jamaican sugar plantation, linking his prosperity to the exploitation of enslaved people. Bertha Mason's Caribbean origins and her portrayal as a violent, degraded figure reflect contemporary racial prejudices, while also serving as a symbol of colonialism's corrupting influence on the colonizer. The theme of independence versus dependence runs throughout the novel, affecting not only Jane's personal development, but also the broader social commentary. Jane's fierce determination to maintain her independence, even at great personal cost, challenges Victorian assumptions about women's natural dependence on male protection and support. Her refusal to become Rochester's mistress stems not from conventional morality alone, but from her understanding that such dependence would compromise her dignity and equality. Education emerges as a crucial theme related to both personal development and social mobility. Jane's love of learning and her natural intelligence provide her with the tools for economic independence and intellectual equality with her social superiors. The novel's detailed attention to educational institutions, from the harsh regime at Lowood to Jane's role as Adele's governess, reflects contemporary debates about educational reform and expanding opportunities for women's learning. The theme of family and belonging addresses fundamental human needs for connection and acceptance. Jane's lack of family connections leaves her vulnerable to abuse and exploitation, while her eventual discovery of cousins at Marsh End provides her with the family ties she has always craved. Her inheritance from her uncle not only provides economic independence, but also establishes her legitimate place in society through family connection. Justice and injustice form recurring themes throughout the novel, from Jane's childhood confrontations with the Reed family's cruelty to her adult struggles with social inequality and moral compromise. Jane's innate sense of justice drives many of her actions and decisions, from her rebellion against John Reed's bullying to her refusal to accept Rochester's bigamous proposal. The novel suggests that true justice requires both individual moral integrity and broader social reform. The theme of appearance versus reality permeates the novel's exploration of social pretensions and moral worth. Characters are frequently not what they initially appear to be. The apparently charitable Mr. Brocklehurst proves cruel and hypocritical. The seemingly weak Rochester possesses hidden strength and passion. The plain Jane reveals extraordinary depth and power. This theme challenges readers to look beyond surface appearances to recognize true worth and character. Fire and ice imagery throughout the novel symbolizes the tension between passion and restraint, emotion and reason. Jane must learn to balance these opposing forces, neither suppressing her passionate nature like Helen Burns, nor allowing it to consume her like Bertha Mason. The novel's resolution suggests that true fulfillment requires integration of feeling and principle, passion and moral conviction. Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre represents a revolutionary departure from conventional Victorian narrative techniques, employing innovative structural and stylistic elements that fundamentally transformed the possibilities of prose fiction. The novel's first-person narrative voice, its complex temporal structure, and its integration of Gothic, realistic, and symbolic elements created a new model for psychological fiction that influenced generations of subsequent writers and established new standards for literary expression. The autobiographical framework of Jane Eyre was both formally innovative and thematically significant. By presenting Jane's story as a memoir written 10 years after the events concluded, Brontë created a dual perspective that allowed for both immediate emotional engagement and mature reflection. The adult Jane, who narrates, possesses knowledge and understanding unavailable to her younger self, creating dramatic irony and interpretive depth that enriches the reader's experience. This temporal complexity allows the novel to explore themes of memory, growth, and the relationship between experience and understanding. The narrative voice itself represents one of the novel's most significant innovations. Jane's direct, honest, and emotionally forthright narration was unprecedented in its psychological intimacy and moral authority. Unlike the omniscient narrators common in earlier fiction, Jane speaks from personal experience with a voice that is simultaneously vulnerable and strong, passionate and principled. This narrative approach creates an unprecedented sense of intimacy between reader and protagonist, while establishing Jane's credibility as both character and moral guide. Bronte's use of the Bildungsroman, or coming-of-age structure, provides the novel's basic organizational framework, while allowing for complex exploration of psychological and social themes. The novel traces Jane's development from childhood through young adulthood, showing how each stage of her experience contributes to her final mature understanding of herself and her place in the world. This developmental structure allows Brontë to explore questions of identity, moral development, and social adaptation, while maintaining narrative unity and coherence. The novel's division into distinct geographical and temporal sections, Gateshead, Lowood, Thornfield, Marsh End, and Ferndean, creates an episodic structure that reflects different phases of Jane's development, while also representing different aspects of Victorian society. Each setting provides Jane with different challenges and opportunities for growth, while also serving symbolic functions related to the novel's thematic concerns. This structural approach allows Brontë to create both narrative variety and thematic coherence. Bronte's integration of Gothic elements into realistic domestic settings created what critics have termed domestic Gothic, a hybrid form that brought the emotional intensity and atmospheric effects of traditional Gothic literature into contemporary social settings. Thornfield Hall, with its mysterious third floor, strange nocturnal sounds, and hidden secrets, functions as a Gothic space within an otherwise realistic novel. This integration allows Brontë to explore psychological and social themes through both realistic observation and symbolic representation. The novel's treatment of the supernatural reflects Bronte's sophisticated approach to psychological realism. Jane's telepathic communication with Rochester at the novel's climax can be interpreted either as genuine supernatural phenomenon or as psychological projection of her deep emotional connection with him. This ambiguity allows readers to interpret the event according to their own beliefs, while maintaining the novel's psychological credibility. Similar ambiguity surrounds other potentially supernatural elements, such as Jane's prophetic dreams and her sense of spiritual presence. Bronte's use of symbolism throughout the novel operates on multiple levels, from obvious symbolic elements like fire and ice to more subtle symbolic patterns involving light and darkness, confinement and freedom, and natural versus artificial elements. The Red Room at Gateshead, where Jane is locked as punishment, functions simultaneously as a realistic domestic space and a symbolic representation of passion, anger, and psychological trauma. This symbolic complexity allows the novel to operate on both literal and metaphorical levels. The novel's dialogue represents another area of innovation, with Brontë creating distinct voices for different characters while maintaining psychological realism and social authenticity. Jane's conversations with Rochester, in particular, demonstrate Bronte's ability to convey complex emotional and intellectual dynamics through naturalistic dialogue. Their verbal sparring reveals character, advances plot, and explores themes while maintaining the realistic speech patterns appropriate to their social positions and personalities. Bronte's handling of time within the narrative reflects careful attention to both chronological development and thematic significance. The novel covers approximately 20 years of Jane's life, from her childhood at Gateshead through her marriage to Rochester, but the narrative time is distributed unevenly to emphasize the most significant periods of development and crisis. The 10-month period at Thornfield receives detailed treatment, while other periods are compressed or summarized, creating narrative rhythm that emphasizes psychological and thematic importance over mere chronological progression. The epistolary elements within the novel, letters, documents, and other written materials, provide both plot advancement and thematic commentary. Mrs. Reed's deathbed revelation of the letter from Jane's uncle, St. John's missionary correspondence, and other documents serve to connect different parts of the narrative, while also commenting on themes of communication, family connection, and social obligation. These elements add realistic detail, while also advancing the novel's exploration of literacy, education, and social mobility. Bronte's descriptive technique combines realistic observation with symbolic significance, creating settings and scenes that function simultaneously as believable environments and thematic commentary. The moors surrounding Thornfield and Marsh End serve as realistic geographical features, while also symbolizing freedom, natural beauty, and spiritual connection. Similarly, the contrast between the oppressive interiors of Gateshead and Lowood and the more open spaces of Thornfield and Ferndean reflects the novel's themes of confinement and liberation. The novel's treatment of class dialect and social speech patterns demonstrates Bronte's attention to linguistic realism and social authenticity. Characters' speech patterns reflect their social positions, educational backgrounds, and regional origins, creating a sense of social authenticity while also serving characterization functions. Hannah's Yorkshire dialect, Adele's French accented English, and the various servants' speech patterns add realistic detail while also commenting on themes of education, social mobility, and cultural difference. Bronte's use of foreshadowing and symbolic preparation creates narrative unity while building suspense and thematic coherence. Early references to fire, madness, and concealed passion prepare readers for later revelations while maintaining narrative surprise. Jane's childhood reading of Bewick's History of British Birds foreshadows her later feelings of isolation and her eventual migration to different environments. This careful preparation creates a sense of inevitability while maintaining narrative tension. The novel's conclusion demonstrates Bronte's sophisticated approach to resolution and closure. Rather than simply providing a conventional happy ending, the final chapters show Jane and Rochester achieving equality through mutual sacrifice and growth. Rochester's physical disability and spiritual humbling balance, Jane's social elevation through inheritance, creating a relationship based on mutual dependence and respect, rather than traditional gender hierarchy. This resolution satisfies both romantic expectations and thematic requirements. The influence of Jane Eyre's narrative innovations on subsequent fiction cannot be overstated. The novel's psychological realism, first-person narrative authority, and integration of social criticism with personal story became models for later writers seeking to explore complex themes through individual experience. The domestic Gothic mode that Brontë pioneered influenced writers from Wilkie Collins to Henry James, while her treatment of women's psychological complexity paved the way for later feminist fiction. The publication of Jane Eyre in 1847 marked a watershed moment in English literature, creating ripple effects that continue to influence writers, readers, and cultural discourse more than 175 years later. The novel's immediate impact was both literary and social, challenging established conventions about fiction, gender roles, and social hierarchy, while inspiring countless adaptations, imitations, and critical responses that have shaped the development of the novel form and women's literature. The initial reception of Jane Eyre revealed the radical nature of its challenge to Victorian sensibilities. Contemporary reviewers were divided between admiration for its originality and power, and alarm at its apparent moral and social transgressions. The Quarterly Review's famous denunciation of the novel's moral Jacobinism compared its challenge to social hierarchy to the radical politics of the French Revolution, while other critics praised its emotional intensity and psychological realism. This polarized reception established a pattern of response that has continued throughout the novel's critical history. The mystery surrounding the identity of Currer Bell added to the novel's initial impact and notoriety. Many contemporary readers and critics assumed the passionate, forthright narrative voice must belong to a male writer, while others detected feminine sensibilities in the novel's emotional intensity and attention to domestic detail. The eventual revelation of Charlotte Bronte's authorship sparked additional controversy about women's capabilities as writers and the propriety of their addressing themes of passion and social criticism. The novel's influence on subsequent Victorian fiction was immediate and profound. Writers like Elizabeth Gaskell, George Eliot, and Thomas Hardy acknowledged their debt to Bronte's psychological realism and social criticism, while the domestic Gothic mode she pioneered influenced authors from Wilkie Collins to Bram Stoker. The figure of the governess became a recurring character type in Victorian fiction, often serving as a vehicle for exploring themes of class, gender, and social mobility that Brontë had established in Jane Eyre. The feminist implications of Jane Eyre have made it a crucial text in the development of women's literature and feminist criticism. Jane's assertion of equality with Rochester and her refusal to accept subordinate status provided a model for later feminist heroines, while her economic independence and moral authority challenged traditional assumptions about women's capabilities and proper social roles. The novel's influence can be traced through later works by authors like Virginia Woolf, Doris Lessing, and Margaret Atwood. The 20th century saw Jane Eyre achieve canonical status as one of the essential works of English literature, studied in schools and universities worldwide, and subjected to extensive critical analysis from multiple theoretical perspectives. Feminist critics like Sandra Gilbert and Susan Gubar found in Bertha Mason a symbol of repressed female anger and sexuality, while post-colonial critics like Gayatri Spivak examined the novel's treatment of colonial exploitation and racial difference. These diverse critical approaches have revealed new layers of meaning and complexity in Bronte's work. The novel's adaptability to different media has contributed significantly to its cultural longevity and influence. Stage adaptations began appearing within years of the novel's publication, while the 20th century saw numerous film and television versions that brought Jane's story to new audiences. Notable adaptations include the 1943 film starring Joan Fontaine and Orson Welles, the 1983 BBC miniseries with Zella Clark and Timothy Dalton, and the 2006 adaptation featuring Ruth Wilson and Toby Stephens. Each adaptation has interpreted the novel for its contemporary audience while contributing to the work's cultural presence. The influence of Jane Eyre on popular culture extends far beyond direct adaptations to include countless works that draw inspiration from its themes, characters, and situations. The Gothic romance genre, which flourished in the mid-20th century, owes a clear debt to Bronte's combination of romantic passion with mysterious atmospheric settings. Contemporary authors like Daphne du Maurier, whose Rebecca explicitly draws on Jane Eyre's plot and themes, and more recent writers like Sarah Waters and Kate Morton continue to explore similar territory. The educational impact of Jane Eyre has been enormous, with the novel serving as a gateway to serious literature for generations of students. Its combination of accessible narrative voice, compelling plot, and complex themes makes it an ideal text for introducing students to literary analysis and critical thinking. The novel's treatment of social issues, gender equality, and moral development provides rich material for classroom discussion and essay writing, while its psychological realism helps students understand character development and motivation. International reception and translation have made Jane Eyre a truly global literary phenomenon. The novel has been translated into dozens of languages and has found enthusiastic audiences in cultures far removed from Victorian England. This international appeal suggests that the novel's themes of individual dignity, social justice, and personal growth transcend cultural boundaries and speak to universal human experiences and aspirations. The scholarly industry surrounding Jane Eyre reflects its canonical status and enduring relevance. Hundreds of books and thousands of articles have been written about the novel, exploring everything from its biographical connections to Charlotte Bronte's life to its relationship with contemporary political and social movements. Critical editions, annotated texts, and scholarly resources continue to appear, ensuring that new generations of readers have access to the historical and cultural context necessary for full appreciation of the work. The novel's influence on feminist discourse extends beyond literature to include social and political movements. Jane's assertion of equality and independence has been cited by women's rights advocates, while her career as a governess has been analysed in studies of women's work and economic independence. The novel's exploration of marriage as a partnership between equals rather than a hierarchical relationship has influenced discussions of gender roles and family structure. Contemporary writers continue to engage with Jane Eyre through various forms of creative response and reinterpretation. Jean Rhys's Wide Sargasso Sea provides a post-colonial response that tells Bertha Mason's story from her own perspective, while other contemporary works explore different aspects of the novel's themes and characters. These creative responses demonstrate the novel's continued relevance and its capacity to inspire new artistic creation. The digital age has created new opportunities for engaging with Jane Eyre through online communities, educational resources, and multimedia adaptations. Websites, blogs, and social media platforms devoted to the novel and its author connect readers worldwide, while digital editions and audiobooks make the text more accessible than ever before. Online courses and educational resources have introduced the novel to new audiences while providing sophisticated analytical tools for serious study. The psychological insights of Jane Eyre continue to resonate with contemporary readers facing similar challenges of identity, independence, and moral choice. Jane's struggle to balance personal desire with moral principle her quest for equality and respect, and her determination to maintain integrity in the face of social pressure, remain relevant to readers navigating the complexities of modern life. The novel's exploration of trauma, resilience, and personal growth speaks to contemporary interests in psychology and mental health. The enduring power of Jane Eyre lies in its successful combination of personal narrative and social criticism, individual story, and universal themes. Charlotte Brontë created a work that satisfies both as entertainment and as serious literature, offering readers the pleasure of a compelling story while challenging them to think critically about society, morality, and human relationships. This dual appeal has ensured the novel's survival through changing literary fashions and cultural movements, establishing it as one of the permanent achievements of English literature. The novel's legacy continues to evolve as new generations of readers discover its power and relevance. In the 21st century, Jane Eyre has found new audiences through young adult literature, where its themes of personal empowerment and resistance to authority resonate strongly with contemporary readers. The novel's influence can be seen in popular series like Suzanne Collins's The Hunger Games, where Katniss Everdeen shares Jane's combination of moral courage and determination to resist oppressive authority. The rise of digital humanities has opened new avenues for studying Jane Eyre, with scholars using computational methods to analyze the novel's language, structure, and cultural impact. These technological approaches have revealed new patterns in Bronte's prose style and have provided quantitative support for long-held critical insights about the novel's innovations. Online databases and digital archives have made primary sources related to the novel's composition and reception more accessible to scholars and students worldwide. The global nature of contemporary literary studies has led to new interpretations of Jane Eyre that emphasize its relevance to non-Western contexts and its connections to global patterns of colonialism, gender oppression, and social change. Scholars from diverse cultural backgrounds have found in the novel themes and conflicts that resonate with their own historical experiences, demonstrating the work's truly universal appeal and significance. The novel's treatment of disability through Rochester's blindness and physical injury has gained new attention in the context of contemporary disability studies. Critics have examined how Bronte's portrayal of Rochester's disabilities affects the power dynamics of his relationship with Jane, and how it challenges or reinforces contemporary attitudes toward physical difference. This analysis has revealed additional layers of social commentary in the novel, while connecting it to ongoing discussions about accessibility and inclusion. The environmental themes implicit in Jane Eyre have attracted attention from eco-critical scholars who examine the novel's representation of natural landscapes and their relationship to human experience. The contrast between the confined artificial spaces of institutions like Lowood and the open natural environments of the moors reflects broader tensions between civilization and nature that continue to resonate in our era of environmental crisis. The novel's exploration of mental health and psychological trauma has found new relevance in our contemporary understanding of post-traumatic stress, childhood abuse, and emotional resilience. Jane's responses to early trauma and her development of coping mechanisms provide a remarkably sophisticated portrayal of psychological adaptation that anticipates modern therapeutic approaches. This aspect of the novel has made it valuable for readers seeking to understand their own experiences of trauma and recovery. The continuing adaptation of Jane Eyre into new media forms demonstrates its enduring cultural vitality. Recent graphic novel versions, audio adaptations, and multimedia presentations have introduced the story to audiences who might not engage with traditional text-based formats. These adaptations often emphasize different aspects of the original work while maintaining its essential themes and emotional impact. The novel's influence on contemporary romance literature extends beyond literary fiction to include popular genres like paranormal romance and historical romance. The brooding, mysterious male love interest pioneered by Rochester has become a standard figure in romance literature, while Jane's combination of vulnerability and strength has influenced countless romantic heroines. This popular cultural influence demonstrates the novel's continued relevance to contemporary fantasies about love and relationships. Educational institutions worldwide continue to find Jane Eyre relevant for teaching critical thinking, literary analysis, and cultural understanding. The novel's treatment of social justice issues makes it valuable for courses in sociology, history, and political science, while its psychological complexity provides rich material for psychology and human development courses. This interdisciplinary relevance has ensured the novel's place in curricula far beyond traditional literature courses. The rise of social media has created new communities of Jane Eyre enthusiasts who share their interpretations, create fan art, and engage in discussions about the novel's themes and characters. These online communities demonstrate the work's continued capacity to inspire passionate engagement and creative response among readers of all ages and backgrounds. Contemporary feminist scholars continue to find new insights in Jane Eyre, particularly in its treatment of intersectionality and its awareness of how gender oppression intersects with class, race, and other forms of social inequality. The novel's nuanced portrayal of different forms of power and powerlessness has proven remarkably prescient in light of contemporary theoretical developments in feminist thought. The novel's legacy in inspiring social change extends beyond its literary influence to include its role in educational reform, women's rights advocacy, and broader movements for social justice. Jane's assertion of dignity and equality has been cited by activists and reformers working to expand opportunities for marginalized groups and to challenge systems of oppression. As we move further into the 21st century, Jane Eyre continues to prove its enduring relevance and power. New readers discover in Jane's story a voice that speaks to their own struggles for dignity, independence, and authentic relationships. The novel's combination of personal narrative and social criticism remains as compelling today as it was in 1847, ensuring that Charlotte Bronte's masterpiece will continue to find new audiences and inspire new interpretations for generations to come. The ultimate testament to Jane Eyre's significance lies not merely in its literary achievements, but in its continued capacity to move, challenge, and inspire readers across cultures and centuries. In an age of rapid social change and continuing struggles for equality and justice, Jane Eyre's voice remains as relevant and powerful as ever, reminding us that individual dignity, moral courage, and the pursuit of authentic relationships are timeless human values that transcend the specific circumstances of any particular historical moment. The novel stands as a permanent achievement in world literature, a work that successfully bridges the gap between entertainment and art, between personal story and universal truth, ensuring its place among the great works of human creative expression.